Thank you very much for the introduction. So I'm working for the Technical University Berlin, as well as for the DRW Berlin, which is the German Institute for Economic Research. And I'll be presenting a couple of works, not only of me, but also of my colleagues on various items. And as mentioned, I will start with some more quantitative modeling results, examining different pathways for the EU Green Deal, including carbon neutrality for Europe. And we have a model that has a lot of functionalities which are not that important. Important to note is maybe that we are examining not only the electricity sector, but the building sector, the industry, and the transportation. So a lot of different sectors which all have different challenges. And we examine all regions in Europe, including, of course, also Bulgaria, and we look until 2050. We know that the world doesn't end in 2051, but this is as there's the target carbon neutrality by 2050. This was our first focus. And then the aspects to understand when you try to do modeling is that, of course, you cannot predict the future. I cannot tell you 100% what will happen, but we try to analyze what are different possibilities that we could imagine. And therefore, we started off with thinking in different scenarios, and there are different things we can imagine in a society to happen. We could imagine in general a more smart society, people, climate awareness, activism, people change their behavior, they adapt, they use less energy. This is a possibility. There's a possibility of technology novelty. This is something like the technology becomes cheaper. We find out new technological appliances. So basically new technologies will make it easier or cheaper to reach climate targets. And there's a different angle which we could exert, policy exertions. So there's strong political measures. This could be a stronger CO2 price. This could be technical regulations, forbidding to use certain technologies. So there's a lot of different things that we could imagine that could drive more climate policies within Europe, and that could lead to us reaching 1.5 or 2 degrees centigrade as a target. So therefore, we thought of these different things that could happen, and we don't know exactly which of the things will happen. So we tried to imagine 4 different scenarios that we could come up with, because I do not want to show you this is the future, but we examine different things, different angles. So for example, there's a techno-friendly scenario. So these are these colorful buttons here. Techno-friendly means the society adapts as well as we have a bit more technologies. A directed transition is basically technology breakthroughs in combination with additional policy measures. And then we have a societal commitment where the society adapts and there's certain climate policies, but there's less technological novelty. And then there's something in the middle, which is a bit of everything, so to speak. So this is therefore trying to show if you're more a technological believer, if you're someone who's more believing in society can change by itself, or if you're more believing in a strong political state, so to speak. Or if you think it has to be a mixture of all of these things, because otherwise we can't make it. So these are different things. Of course, all the slides can afterwards also be given to you. So just for your information. And interestingly enough, you can see now the results. It's a lot of information on here. Once again, I'm trying to walk you through the diagrams. What you can see is the energy mix from 2015 until 2050 in all 4 diagrams. You can see that basically in these blackish, brownish colors, you will see lignite, hard coal, and oil. This is not only the electricity sector, but the transportation sector and the heating sector as well. So this is why you have also that much oil in there. You can see natural gas and nuclear are the reddish colors. And then you have the renewable in green, blue, and yellowish colors. This is basically something you can see across all scenarios. You might be surprised that the energy demand is reduced that much. This is due to the higher efficiency simply. This is if you are using a coal power plant or gas power plant, you have efficiency rates of 40 up to 60% at best. However, if you have renewable energies, you have nearly 100% efficiency, so to speak, if you just compare the primary energy input to the output ratio. Something that I think is interesting, even if I don't have time to go detailedly into the figures, is that no matter in which of these 4 scenarios you believe in, the picture actually looks very similar. You will see that coal, these are the blackish dots, they go away all across Europe. This is for the entire Europe. In some cases, already in 2035, you hardly have any coal. In some other scenarios, you can see in 2050, there's a tiny bit left, and then it fades away after 2050 only. There's a bit of gas, but gas, the reddish colors, they are always being reduced. at a different speed, but they're always being reduced. There's no scenario where gas is rising. And you can see that renewables are always rising in all scenarios. The share is different. So for example, here in the blue scenario, you have a lot of PV. The yellow bars, they're relatively high. And in other scenarios, they're a bit smaller. But the general, what's happening across all scenarios is very similar. And this is, I think, the main message to understand. If we want to reach carbon neutrality, this goes in hand with some automatic consequences, basically a coal phase out very early, later on oil and gas phase out. Due to the assumptions for the costs of nuclear, we don't see a nuclear renaissance of any kind. We see in two scenarios that there is basically no nuclear. We see two scenarios where there's a bit of nuclear, but at a lower amount compared to today. So there is no time for nuclear renaissance simply because it's too expensive. Coming to the second top of my topic, the German Coal Commission, maybe just wrapping up a bit, what was the recommendation of the Coal Commission's decision in January 2019? Basically, some parts of the coal capacity, 1/3 of the coal capacity will go offline by 2022. And the second third will basically go offline by 2030, and then the last share will go offline either 2035 or 2038 latest. So this is basically, it's more or less a linear reduction of coal until the mid of the 2030s. This is basically what has been decided. In addition, the German government has announced that they will support the German coal regions with 40 billion in transitions. This will mean 2 billions per year for 20 years. And it's important to say that these billions of transition support money, they are not necessarily additional money, but in some cases anyhow, some investments had been planned in these regions, construction of a new highway, building a new research center. So in some cases, it is also just a redirection of money, or investing earlier, or sometimes deciding to build a certain infrastructure, not in one village, but in a village that is affected by a coal mine. So therefore shifting investments and not necessarily additional investments. Costs and conditions for compensating the utilities are subject to the negotiations with the government, and this has been made during the year of 2020, and they have basically reached an agreement. Not everything has been signed yet, but they're closing the deal now, which will basically cause additional compensation money, especially for lignite companies. And the Coal Commission confirmed the target of 65% renewable share by 2030. Which before was at a lower rate. So basically, these were the decisions by the German Coal Commission, and the German Coal Commission's recommendations were more or less afterwards put into law by the German government. There were some adjustments in some cases, which I might come to later. What are the lessons learned of the Coal Commission, and not only the Commission, but the entire process that led to it beforehand? In general, we used to talk a lot about the fossil fuel-based economy that is shifted to a decentralized renewable energy system, and this needs a change in the energy system. And this is really fancy, and a lot of engineers talk about this, and it's really nice. And we tend to forget that there's a lot of other things that we need to incorporate as well. Just to mention some regional structure policy levels, we need to take care of the workers and citizens, the industry, the economy, infrastructure, not only being highways, but also being fast internet. We have the problem in Germany that we are in a COVID lockdown and everybody's sitting home, and a lot of places don't have fast internet connections, which is really embarrassing, and people outside Germany don't believe us if we say so. But we really are not good at implementing digital infrastructure, and this is huge shortcoming if you want huge investors to come into your country and into your region. If you don't have internet access, there's no chance. Education and research facilities is very important for the future of people, and soft location factors. Germany is a relatively rich country, and people are, you might say, a bit spoiled. So therefore, just telling them you're going to have a job is not sufficient for them to stay within a region, because they might decide to go to another region where they will also find a job, but they have a football club and they have a museum and they have a nice neighborhood where they want to live. So therefore, it is important to have this in mind, because we will see in Germany, especially in the eastern part of Germany, there are regions where people leave the country, and it's especially younger generations, it's especially women that basically leave the country. And this is basically a huge problem. In addition, there are aspects which in Germany, the financial system and the social security and pension system are working still relatively well, which make it easier to cope with such a just transition, because we only have to take care of the workers until the age of 60 or 65, and then there's another system that takes care of them. This is not the case for all other countries and has to be kept in mind. In addition, the question of how do we govern this, multi-level governance and planning, participation of relevant stakeholders is very important, because people in the coal regions in Germany, they didn't really like it if Berlin would tell them what to do. So basically the regions themselves want to decide what to do. They want the money to be given to them for them to choose whom to give it to, and to have therefore also to a stronger identity for what is being built afterwards. And the people in coal regions have a tendency wanting to stay in energy regions. So therefore, investing, for example, in renewable energies gets more support than investing only in tourism actions. Something that is still important to note, if you look at the figures in Germany, I will jump a bit ahead, is that here you can see the jobs in the coal sector in Germany, and you see the electricity share. This is the line on top, how it evolved. And the mining employees were reduced a lot in the last times. The share of electricity produced was reduced from 60% to 40%, and we are actually now already at 25% only, so it was reduced even more. But interestingly enough, the share of renewables, this is the green line, increased slowly, 40%. Now we're actually already at 50%. And there are more jobs that are also linked to the renewable energy sector, which is basically the positive side of the just transition as well. But it is important to note that these jobs are not always in the same villages, the same communities, and that in many cases they are not as well paid as in the coal sector. So we have to fight more for better working conditions in the renewable energy sector, and to make sure that some of these jobs also are being settled in the coal regions. So therefore, kicking off the discussions with some main findings from my side, and also some comments with respect to lessons learned from the German example maybe. There are different pathways towards climate neutrality, and I'm a modeler myself. I've been doing this for 10 years, but I still cannot tell you how the future will look like. But we see some clear trends, which are across all scenarios the same. All of them imply a coal exit. Ideally, especially to meet climate targets, we would need a coal phase out by 2030 across Europe. Of course, also Germany has only agreed on a phase out by 2035 to 2038, so this has to be increased. In addition, what we've seen in Germany already in the last 2 years, the situation changed a lot because the CO2 price in Europe has increased a bit more than we had anticipated, and the price of gas is also a bit cheaper than anticipated, and there's the COVID crisis and a lower electricity demand, etc. So therefore, my personal projection is that we will see a coal phase out in Germany in the early 2030s, maybe 2032 or 2031, due to economic reasoning. And the now agreed on political phase out by 2035, 2038 will be adopted at some stage, simply because it's too expensive to run a coal power plant at a certain stage if renewables increase the rate the way that they're doing it now. In addition, there is no room and there's no need for additional investment in fossil gas, as well as for nuclear investments. We don't see this in any of our modeling. Nuclear is too expensive, and there's no room for gas if we want to meet climate targets, because fossil gas also has CO2 emissions that do not comply with carbon neutrality. And therefore, for Europe, but also across the world, 100% renewable energy supply is the cheapest and the only technological solution, and it is out there. So it is something that we see that is already possible. We already see a lot of hours in Germany where we have rates of renewable electricity exceeding 70% in certain days, and this is not a problem with respect to energy security. We have had the news report this year that the risk of a blackout in Germany is as low as it has never been before, so the energy security is remaining stable. Not necessarily because of the renewables, but because technology is getting better, and because also the engineers in the offices do a good job in regulating all this. It's not getting easier for them, but they're doing a good job and they're catching up with it. This is a good thing. I think it is important to note that different challenges prevail for countries and regions to enable just transition. It is more difficult for Germany to do so than it is, for example, for France, I would say. However, it is, of course, also more difficult for Czech Republic and for Poland or for Bulgaria than to do it for Germany, as we have more financial means. What we've seen in Germany in the discussion of the German coal phase out, it's important to talk with everyone, to bring everyone on the table. It is, however, also important to tell people that we are not discussing if there will be a coal phase out or not, but we are just discussing when exactly it will be and how we will compensate the regions and how we will take care of it. But it is important to start thinking of a plan B now, and denying that there is a need for change, and denying that actually coal power plants, if you include all the costs that they lead to, are not an option. This is important to note. So therefore, I'm very happy that I'm invited to speak here. I'm very interested to share my experiences with you, and looking forward to the discussion with you, because I think it's very important to discuss this together, and there's a lot of things we can learn from one another. Thank you very much.